going to be our session that follows the IVF talk on the long and winding road to pregnancy, endometriosis, IVF, and never giving up. Our two panelists are Alexandria Ossinault. She's a passionate advocate for women struggling with endometriosis. She hopes to empower fellow endo warriors through her own trials, tribulations, and successes to prove you can live a life where endometriosis does not define you. Our other is Latia Lee. She's a registered nurse. She was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis after suffering from debilitating pain for 23 years. It was through her own research and self-advocacy that she self-diagnosed herself and finally had surgical excision of her endometriosis. She strives to bring awareness to this very debilitating disease and empower women to seek the proper medical treatment they desperately need and deserve. So these may have different stories than we've heard. One of the things I knew in my practice was that, remember, my practice was not specifically endometriosis. It had more to do with pain and infertility. In an infertility practice, you see women who do not have pain with their endometriosis. A few of them, they don't even have PMS. They're those women who don't know that their periods are even going to start. They get surprised. So infertility is a different thing than most of you have in this practice, and we'll see if our panelists will share some of that. Can you share a little bit about, so let's start with Alexandria. Can you share a little bit about your journey with endometriosis and how it impacted your path to parenthood?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with endometriosis by having emergency surgery. So I was in and out of the ER a few times with excruciating pain. The first time, small 5-centimeter cyst, as Dr. Chu had said, that's maybe hemorrhagic. It's kind of normal. We'll refer you to a gynecologist. Waited to get that referral. Ended up in the ER again, and it got a little bit bigger. Saw the gynecologist. They put me on Vizan as a form of hormone treatment. And then within another month, I had another really bad pain episode, ended up in the ER, and had emergency surgery. Through the surgery, I ended up having a 12-centimeter endometrioma that was attached to my right ovary, and they weren't able to separate the endometrioma from the ovary, so I lost my right ovary as well. I was 19 at the time. So waking up from surgery, it was pretty alarming, hearing the diagnosis of stage 4 deep infiltrating endometriosis. You're down an ovary at this point, and they also said that when they went in, my bowel was completely tethered to the back of my uterus, but because they weren't prepared to go in and do that, they had to leave all of that. So I didn't have any excision of any of my endo at that time. So it was pretty overwhelming. I was in university at the time, single, was not, obviously wanted to have children always, but was not thinking about that. So then it kind of started the road of me thinking about freezing eggs and going down IVF and kind of trying to take control of it. At that time, I did a lot of research into IVF and got in at a clinic, but I just didn't feel emotionally ready to make some of those decisions. I was, a little bit too young. I didn't know the answers about what I'd want to do if I didn't use my eggs, if I didn't end up making embryos with them. And so I felt that it wasn't the right time for me to do it. And I was kind of taking the risk knowing that with one ovary and endometriosis, I might be running the risk of not being able to have biological kids, but it didn't feel right at that time. So fast forward to 2022, I felt more pain on my left side, had an MRI, and there was a cyst on my left ovary. Again, at this point, I'd just been managing all my other endo symptoms, so trying through diet, through exercise to manage all of the GI and bowel symptoms. And when the cyst came up on the left side, I was like, okay, we need to kind of tackle this before it gets too far. And as a lot of the other panelists had said, in Canada, I was referred to a specialist, but the wait for me, so this was September 2022, my consultation appointment was April 2023. So I knew at that point I would end up in the ER again and hopefully, probably end up losing my ovary just because I wouldn't have a specialist doing my surgery. So that's when I reached out to Dr. Sechkin, and my surgery was actually 2 years ago today. So I reached out to him in dire need. I called his front desk and kind of like bombarded them. They're like, oh, okay, we'll need to get some tests. And I'm like, I have everything. I'll send it right away. And he got me in within 2 weeks. And then I had surgery within a month of seeing him. And at that point, I was with a partner. We were living together. And Dr. Setchkin and Dr. Chu were pretty upfront with me, just saying, like, you have one ovary, you have stage 4 deep infiltrating. He had to do complete reconstruction of my pelvis, take the cyst off my ovary. You know, if you want to try to have kids, it's within, 6 to 9 months is your window of, your uterus and everything looking the best. If not, you might have to go down the IVF route. So at that point, we were ready. We knew we wanted kids, so we were okay to go ahead and start trying, and we were really, really blessed. It only took us about 3 months of trying after my surgery to be able to get pregnant. So I think it's hard for some people if you're not at a point where you're able to do that and start trying, but we were ready, so we were able to. So I have a 1-year-old at home, and I'm pregnant with my second baby, so.
Hi. Okay. So, like I said, my journey started 23. It took 23 years for my diagnosis. I had severe cramps since I was 14. Went to doctors, were always dismissed. So I just kind of thought that this painful periods that I had each cycle was just part of the norm that I would have to live with. Until I started having lung collapses. And I just noticed that the lung collapses were with my cycle. And I just, being a nurse, I just started doing some research and saw there was probably catamenial pneumothorax and just sought a specialist. And Dr. Setchkin was my surgeon, and he was really the first person who believed me. But I also remember him telling my mom that I'll be able to help her. She'll feel better. So that first surgery was about 9 hours. Had endo on my diaphragm, had a bowel resection all throughout my pelvis. Had another surgery about 12 weeks later, developed on my ischial spine. So it was a long history of having these surgeries, and I'm a single mom by choice, up there in age, and I knew that infertility, endometriosis would affect my infertility. So I wanted to try to have a baby. So I started at the age of 39 and tried the traditional like IUIs. I had all the testing. My AMH was pretty low at that point. So with my reproductive endocrinologist at the time, it was actually Dr. Singer, which I love him so much. We decided to try 4 cycles of medicated IUIs, and if it did not work, actually, my next step for me was donor egg or donor embryo. Just because I knew that my AMH was low, my age of probability of actually me producing a healthy egg on my own would be very slim. And at that point, I just wanted to be a mother. I didn't care the route of what it was. So that's what I had decided after those cycles that were not successful. And I did the whole donor egg process and had 3 beautiful embryos, and then had 3 transfers that were not successful. 2 chemical pregnancies. I had a chemical pregnancy with my IUI, and then 1 failed pregnancy. And totally devastated. But I just kind of felt like something was wrong with my immune system. Like I could implant, but they weren't fully implanting. My intuition said it was. So I had sought just a reproductive mammalogist. I had some testing done, and basically it was my body was attacking these embryos. So I just kind of found a specialist. They put me on an immune protocol, and my 5th embryo transfer worked. So I now have a 20-month-old little girl named Amari Grace. But it was a long journey. I started at the age of 39, summer, and then I had her at 43. So it was a long road, but it was worth it because I now have this little beautiful little girl, thanks to the gift of donor. egg donor donation and actually sperm donor, because she is a double conceived, because I'm a single mom by choice, and she truly is the love of my life. And if anyone, I know a lot of times with endometriosis, you might have a hard time conceiving, and they might suggest the route of donor embryos or egg donors or adoption. Honestly, once you hold that baby, it does not matter. They're your child. You are birthing them, you carry them, they're yours. So if someone is ever just a little hesitant because they feel that they might not have that connection to their child, you will. Trust me. I think I'm a little bit more overprotective of her, because I fought so hard for her. So I'm just grateful for her. So, yes.
What kind of emotional support system did you have, and what kind do you wish you had had during all of this?
I had a lot of support from my endo sisters. Some of them are here. You also develop a community within the infertility world. Mine was more specifically for women who were going through egg donation. And we would cheer each other on, because the process is hard. You're already going through egg donation, which is hard. You're giving a piece of yourself up. And then with egg donation, you feel like there's more of a guarantee that you're going to get that baby because you're not using your own eggs. And then when it doesn't happen, when there's a delay of it, there's complete devastation, because it's like, what is the next step if this doesn't work? So they were really there to lift me up. More so than sometimes my mom. She was a little bit more protective. She was more like, well, it shouldn't be this hard. Why is it so hard? Maybe you should go the other route of maybe adoption. And I'd be like, no, that's not what I want to do. So I just kind of reached out to my endo sisters and to my infertility sisters as well.
Thank you. Alexandria, what kind of suggestions do you have for people who are just starting?
Yeah, I would say that, and I really admire your story so much. And in some ways, it's, my emergency surgery was very traumatizing, but in the same sense, it was a blessing because I got my diagnosis at that point and I was able to get ahead of it and take control of it at an earlier point in my life. So as much as I lost an ovary and it was traumatic, I was from a younger age able to get that. I didn't have to wait that really long period of time. My diagnosis was probably, 5 years from my period. I was 19. So I would say just, trust yourself. I do think support systems are really good. It's really hard when you're in pain, fatigued, to advocate for yourself and you're going to these appointments and you're emotionally distraught. You don't know what's wrong with you. So having someone come to appointments with you if you can, I think is a big thing. My mom always came with me to my appointments. I would say another thing is to also something that was really powerful for me was I started my health binder, and every time I would go to an appointment, I would ask my doctor to print out their doctor's notes or send them to me. And every time I got a MRI or an ultrasound, I would ask for all of the readings of that and just keep my own copies of them. It becomes so overwhelming when you're going to different providers and getting different opinions and they're asking you to say your story. What are your symptoms? How long have you been feeling? When did this start? You're so emotionally just at your wit's end. It's really, really hard to put that into words. And I find sometimes that's why it's easy to get dismissed because you kind of just seem a little bit like elusive and you don't know how to put into words what's happening to you. So I had this binder and it was like my little Bible. I would take to every appointment with me and I'd be like, here's what's happened. Here is, I'd write down when I had a period, if I was having pain, where was it situated? And that way I didn't have to rely so much on myself when I would go to appointments. I'd be like, this is everything in here about what's going on with me. And then I would just keep adding to it as I went. But having support, I think at the end of the day, it's so hard to do it on your own. And I wouldn't have been able to do it with my mom. Obviously, I'm from Canada, so I had to travel here for a consult. So just having someone believe in you, because I think, your work can be dismissive, taking time off of work and things like that. So having people who stand by you even through the hard times before you get that diagnosis or before, you have a plan in place is a big deal too.
Thank you. Ladea, do you have any suggestions for anyone else who might have to make that emotional decision to shift to donor eggs?
if you're a little bit hesitant, you can reach out to, there are wonderful support groups for women who use egg donation. Reach out to us. You can reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm an open book. And I had to go to therapy. You had to go to therapy sessions to actually process the loss of your genetics and be okay with that and find out, once my daughter's older, how to navigate the conversations of telling her that she is donor conceived. That's something I don't want to hide from her. So, my next step is going to be that. I have books and stuff like that. I know she's a little too young now, but I want to start that process now so that she knows it's the norm for her. Like, she was chosen. I'm blessed to have her as a gift. It wasn't let, so that's also what I have to say.
That's great. Thank you. Let's have some questions from the audience. Beck, we've got a microscope out there. Do you want my microscope? Here comes a microscope.
Thanks. Hey, can you talk about your, you said you did an autoimmune protocol. I think from a diet standpoint, that's something I hope is more discussed today, because I think a lot of women are developing mental issues around food and being afraid that what they eat is going to make their cramps worse. And I think I have a lot of friends that have different autoimmune diseases that have done the protocol and the Whole30 thing, and it's not supposed to be meant to be done long term, right? Mm-hmm. So I was just curious if you could share a little bit about your experience to finding those specialists who helped you find that care.
Just by researching, there's a great Facebook group that talks about immunoprotocols for women who are having difficulty conceiving. There are not too many reproductive immunologists, just maybe about 4 or 5 in the country. So some of them are longer waits, but you just kind of seek out and consult with them, and they do very, very, very extensive testing. It took about 5 months of testing before everything came back, where my physician had recommended an immune protocol that was specifically for me. I mean, there are some clinics that just kind of do more of a generic one, but I think it's important that you want to have one that focuses on what's wrong with you, so that they can try to help you along that process.
And one additional question.
Hi. Regarding your journey, I imagine that you're able to have a lot of insurance coverage, but what happens if you don't have insurance coverages for all these processes and you don't have the financial resources? What are your options?
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. So we didn't have insurance coverage coming from Canada. I'm really blessed that I, had parents that were able to help me financially to come and get this treatment. I know that it's not an option for a lot of people. That being said, a lot of people would be like, why didn't you get treatment in Canada? There is great endometriosis specialists in Canada. It's just the wait was really long. And for me, fertility was really important, as well as my quality of life. At that point, again, a lot of panelists have talked about this. I had been living with debilitating bowel pain and stuff for a while, which obviously it was really important for me to get that fixed too, but what the 1 ovary fertility was at top of my mind. I would say advocating for yourself. There is a lot of surgeons that will do surgeries, at different costs and things like that. You don't need to come to Manhattan per se to come for a surgery and see that. But I think that, a lot of communities can help. You can do GoFundMes to help you. I've seen people who struggle with endo and they want to get a surgery and are going to Europe or per se, starting things like that. I think the power of community and getting your voice and your story heard is really important. But I don't take for granted knowing that we did have the ability to come here and get things done in a timely manner. And I think that's why it's really important, though, to have these conferences and bring awareness to it, because it's not fair that some people would have to wait that long and be stuck with no options. So I think that the more we talk about it and the more we tell our stories, we can express how waiting 14 months for care, waiting 12 months for a consult, that's not even for surgery, isn't really acceptable. And again, like the panelist said, no one wants to be going to these appointments. No one wants to be in pain. So when you're in pain and then you're told, wait another 14 months to get treatment or see someone, it is so mentally challenging. So to even then have the ability to go and do more research, like you just feel so dismissed. So I feel like the more we talk about it, hopefully more doctors will want to, get into this field, and then it won't be these long waits. It can be, within your area, you have 5 that you could go to. There was only still 2 in my area that I could have chose to went to, and some were an hour travel just from that. So it's hard, and it's really unfortunate that some people would not be able to have those options. I totally can acknowledge that, and it makes me really sad.
I'm just gonna address that. I had to pay for everything, most of it on my own. I went through not 1, but 2 egg donors. So the first egg donor, I used my 403B. I took money out of my 403B. My second one, I will talk to you personally about that. I don't want to share it. But another route that you could go, which was able to pay majority of my second egg donor, but I also went to a different clinic, created my embryos at a clinic in Utah, and shared an egg donor, which was a lot more than paying for a full cycle yourself, and then had my embryos shipped to New York City. So we have options. There are options.
I'd like to thank you for sharing your stories. Appreciate everything you've done for us. Thank you now.